Pius III was Senese. At just 26 days, he had one of the shortest pontificates in papal history. Francesco was the nephew of Pope Pius II, who granted him the use of the family name Piccolomini and appointed the 21-year-old Francesco as Archbishop of Siena. He served as papal legate in a number of places. In 1503, the now frail Cardinal Piccolomini was elected pope as a compromise candidate between the Borgia and Della Rovere factions. Although he announced plans for reforms, he died less than a month later. Some have alleged that Pope Pius died of poison, administered at the instigation of Pandolfo Petrucci, the ruler of Siena. He was buried in the chapel of San Andrea in St. Peter's Basilica, next to his uncle Pius II, his brothers Giacomo and Andrea serving as his executors. He had already chosen his burial place when he wrote his will of 1493. When the basilica was being rebuilt, the monument was transferred below to the grottos and the remains of Pius III and his uncle to the church of San Andrea della Valle in Rome, put in a mausoleum created by Cardinal Alessandro Damasceni Peretti in 1614. Julius II was Albiso Lazy and the nephew of Sixtus IV. Nicknamed the Warrior Pope or the Fearsome Pope, he chose his papal name not in honor of Pope Julius I, but in emulation of Julius Caesar. One of the most powerful and influential popes, Julius II was a central figure of the High Renaissance and left a significant cultural and political legacy. As a result of his policies during the Italian Wars, the Papal States remained independent and centralized, and the office of the papacy continued to be crucial, diplomatically and politically, during the entirety of the 16th century in Italy and Europe. In 1506, Julius II established the Vatican Museums and initiated the rebuilding of the St. Peter's Basilica. The same year, he organized the famous Swiss Guards for his personal protection and commanded a successful campaign in Romagna against local lords. The interests of Julius II lay also in the New World, as he ratified the Treaty of Tordesillas, establishing the first bishoprics in the Americas and beginning the Catholicization of Latin America. In 1508, he commissioned the Raphael rooms and Michelangelo's paintings in the Sistine Chapel. Julius II was described by Machiavelli in his works as an ideal prince. Pope Julius II allowed people seeking indulgences to donate money to the church, which would be used for the construction of St. Peter's Basilica. In his Julius Excluded from Heaven, the scholar Erasmus of Rotterdam described a Pope Julius II in the afterlife, planning to storm heaven when he is denied entry. Leo X was Florentine. Born into the prominent political and banking Medici family of Florence, Giovanni was the second son of Lorenzo de' Medici, ruler of the Florentine Republic, and was elevated to the cardinalate in 1489. Following the death of Pope Julius II, Giovanni was elected pope after securing the backing of the younger members of the Sacred College. Early on in his rule, he oversaw the closing sessions of the Fifth Council of the Lateran, but struggled to implement the reforms agreed. In 1517, he led a costly war that succeeded in securing his nephew, Lorenzo di Piero de' Medici, as Duke of Urbino, but reduced papal finances. In Protestant circles, Leo is associated with granting indulgences for those who donated to reconstruct St. Peter's Basilica, a practice that was soon challenged by Martin Luther's 95 Theses. Leo rejected the Protestant Reformation, and his papal bull of 1520, Exsurge Domine, condemned Luther's condemnatory stance, rendering ongoing communication difficult. He was a significant patron of the arts. Under his reign, progress was made on the rebuilding of St. Peter's Basilica, and artists such as Raphael decorated the Vatican rooms. Leo also reorganized the Roman University and promoted the study of literature, poetry, and antiquities. He died in 1521 and is buried in Santa Maria sopra Minerva, Rome. He was the last pope not to have been in priestly orders at the time of his election to the papacy. Adrian VI was Utrechter and the only Dutch pope. Last pope to not be from the Italian peninsula until 1978. Adrian studied at the University of Leuven in the Low Countries, where he rose to the position of professor of theology, also serving as its rector. In 1507, he became the tutor of the future Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. who later trusted him as both his emissary and his regent. In 1516, Charles, now King of Castile and Aragon, appointed Adrian, Bishop of Tortosa, Spain, and soon thereafter Grand Inquisitor of the kingdoms of Aragon and Castile. Pope Leo X made him a cardinal in 1517, and after Leo's death, he was elected pope in 1522 as a compromise candidate. Adrian came to the papacy in the midst of one of its greatest crises, threatened not only by Lutheranism to the north, but also by the advance of the Ottoman Turks to the east. He refused to compromise with Lutheranism theologically, demanding Luther's condemnation as a heretic. However, he is noted for reforming the Catholic Church's administration in response to the Protestant Reformation. Adrian's admission that the Roman Curia itself was at fault for the turmoil in the Church was read at the 1522 to 1523 Diet of Nuremberg. He was succeeded by the second Medici Pope, Clement VII. Adrian VI and Martellus II are the only popes of the modern era to retain their baptismal names after their election. Adrian VI is the last pope to date to take on the pontifical name Adrian. Clement VII was Florentine and cousin of Leo X. Elected at the end of the Italian Renaissance, Clement came to the papacy with a high reputation as a statesman. He had served with distinction as chief advisor to Pope Leo X, Pope Adrian VI, and as Grand Maestro of Florence. Assuming leadership at a time of crisis, with the Protestant Reformation spreading, the Church nearing bankruptcy, a struggle in Italy between Europe's two most powerful kings, Holy Roman Emperor Charles V and Francis I of France, each of whom demanded that the Pope choose a side, Henry VIII of England's heretical church, and Turkish invasions of Eastern Europe led by Suleiman the Magnificent. In 1527, souring relations with Emperor Charles V led to the violent sack of Rome, during which Clement was imprisoned. After escaping confinement in the Castel Sant'Angelo, Clement compromised the church's and Italy's independence by allying with his former jailer, Charles V. Clement left a significant cultural legacy in the Medici tradition, commissioning artworks by Raphael, Benvenuto Cellini, and Michelangelo. Paul III was Canonese. He came to the papal throne in an era following the sack of Rome in 1527, and rife with uncertainties in the Catholic Church following the Protestant Reformation. His pontificate initiated the Counter-Reformation with the Council of Trent in 1545, as well as the wars of religion with Emperor Charles V's military campaigns against the Protestants in Germany. He recognized new Catholic religious orders and societies, such as the Jesuits, the Barnabites, and the Congregation of the Oratory. His efforts were distracted by nepotism to advance the power and fortunes of his family, including his illegitimate son, Pier Luigi Farnese. Paul III was a significant patron of artists, including Michelangelo, and it is to him that Nicholas Copernicus dedicated his heliocentric treatise, which erroneously states that the sun was at the center of the universe. Julius III was Roman. After a career as a distinguished and effective diplomat, he was elected to the papacy as a compromise candidate after the death of Paul III. As Pope, he made only reluctant and short-lived attempts at reform, mostly devoting himself to a life of personal pleasure. His reputation, and that of the Catholic Church, were greatly harmed by his scandal-ridden relationship with his adopted nephew, Innocenzo Ciocchi del Monte. He is the most recent pope to date to take on the pontifical name Julius. The pope's lack of interest in political or ecclesiastical affairs caused dismay among his contemporaries. He spent the bulk of his time and a great deal of papal money on entertainments at the Villa Giulia, created for him by Vignola. But more significant and lasting was his patronage of the great Renaissance composer Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina, whom he brought to Rome as his maestro di capella, Giorgio Vasari, who supervised the design of the Villa Giulia, and Michelangelo, who worked there. Martellus II was Montefanesi. Before his accession as pope, he had been cardinal priest of Santa Croce in Jerusalem. He is the most recent pope to choose to retain his birth name as his regnal name upon his accession, and the most recent pope to date with the regnal name Marcellus. Cervini was the maternal uncle of Robert Bellarmine. His father, Riccardo Cervini, and Pope Clement VII were personal friends. Cervini served in the household of Cardinal Alessandro Farnese. When Farnese became pope, Cervini served as his secretary and was employed on a number of diplomatic missions. After suffering from a stroke and slipping into a coma, he would die on the 22nd day of his term as pope. Paul IV was Caprigliese. While serving as papal nuncio in Spain, he developed an anti-Spanish outlook that later colored his papacy. In response to an invasion of part of the Papal States by Spain during his papacy, he called for a French military intervention. After a defeat of the French and with Spanish troops at the edge of Rome, the papacy and Spain reached a compromise. French and Spanish forces left the Papal States, and the Pope thereafter adopted a neutral stance between France and Spain. His papacy was characterized by strong nationalism in reaction to the influence of Philip II of Spain and the Habsburgs. He curbed some clerical abuses in Rome, but his methods were seen as harsh. He would introduce the first modern Index Librorum Prohibitorum, and banned works were in error. In spite of his advanced age, he was a tireless worker and issued new decrees and regulations daily, unrelenting in his determination to keep Protestants and recently immigrated Jews pretending to believe in Christ from gaining influence in the Papal States. Paul IV issued the papal bull Cum Nimis Absurdum, which confined Jews in Rome to the neighborhood Claustro degli Ebrei. Pius IV was Milanese. Born in Milan, his family considered itself a branch of the House of Medici and used the same coat of arms. Although modern historians have found no proof of this connection, the Medici of Florence recognized the claims of the Medici of Milan in the early 16th century. Pope Paul III appointed Medici Archbishop of Ragusa and sent him on diplomatic missions to Germany and Hungary. He presided over the final session of the Council of Trent. His nephew, Cardinal Charles Borromeo, was a close advisor. As Pope, Pius IV initiated a number of building projects in Rome, including one to improve the water supply. Pius IV suffered from many illnesses such as gout, which restricted his mobility. Giacomo Soranzo remarked between May and August 1565 to the Venetian Senate about the Pope's health, commenting that he possessed a great natural vigor, however. Gout impeded movement in his legs, shoulders, arms, and hands. Sorzano also mentioned that this meant that the Pope, more often than not, needed to be carried in the sedia gestatoria to avoid walking. Pius IV also suffered from a major illness in 1564, from which he recovered. However, the Pope fell ill 8 days before his death, with a constant fever throughout the duration. Carlo Borromeo, who arrived in Rome during the evening on the 8th of December, was with the Pope when he died alongside St. Philip Neri. St. Pius V was Boscesi. He is chiefly notable for his role in the Council of Trent, the Counter-Reformation, and the standardization of the Roman Rite within the Latin Church. Pius V declared Thomas Aquinas a doctor of the Church. As a cardinal, Ghislieri gained a reputation for putting orthodoxy before personalities, prosecuting 8 French bishops for heresy. He also stood firm against nepotism, rebuking his predecessor, Pope Pius IV, to his face when he wanted to make a 13-year-old member of his family a cardinal and subsidize a nephew from the papal treasury. By means of the papal bull of 1570, Regnans in Excelsis, Pius V excommunicated Elizabeth I of England for heresy and persecution of English Catholics during her reign. He also arranged the formation of the Holy League, an alliance of Catholic states to combat the advancement of the Ottoman Empire in Eastern Europe. Although outnumbered, the Holy League famously defeated the Ottomans at the Battle of Lepanto in 1571. Pius V attributed the victory to the intercession of the Blessed Virgin Mary and instituted the Feast of Our Lady of Victory. Biographers report that as the Battle of Lepanto ended, Pius rose and went over to a window where he stood gazing toward the east. Looking at the sky, he cried out, "A truce to business. Our great task at present is to thank God for the victory which he has just given the Christian army." Gregory XIII was Bolognese. He is best known for commissioning and being the namesake for the Gregorian calendar, which remains the internationally accepted civil calendar to this day. Once in the chair of St. Peter, Gregory XIII dedicated himself to reform of the Catholic Church. He implemented the recommendations of the Council of Trent. He mandated that cardinals reside in their sees without exception and designated a committee to update the Index of Forbidden Books. He would continually aid exiled English and Irish Catholics in attempting to overthrow the heretical Queen in England and her plantations in Ireland. He is the first pope to receive embassy from Japan. He appointed his illegitimate son Giacomo, Castellan of Sant'Angelo, and Gonfalonier of the Church. Venice, anxious to please the Pope, enrolled his son among its nobles, and Philip II of Spain appointed him general in his army. Gregory also helped his son to become a powerful feudatory through the acquisition of the Duchy of Sora on the border between the Papal States and the Kingdom of Naples. In order to raise funds for his endeavors, Gregory confiscated a large portion of the houses and properties throughout the states of the Church, causing chaos within the state. In Rome, Gregory XIII built the Gregorian Chapel in the Basilica of St. Peter and extended the Quirinal Palace in 1580. He also turned the Baths of Diocletian into a granary in 1575. Sixtus V was Grottamaresi. As a youth, he joined the Franciscan order, where he displayed talents as a scholar and preacher and enjoyed the patronage of Pius V, who made him a cardinal. As a cardinal, he was known as Cardinal Montalto. As Pope, he energetically rooted out corruption and lawlessness across Rome and launched a far-sighted rebuilding program that continues to provoke controversy as it involved the destruction of antiquities. The cost of these works was met by heavy taxation that caused much suffering. Sixtus also attempted in 1586 to introduce into the secular law in Rome the Old Testament penalty for adultery, which is death. The measure ultimately failed. His foreign policy was regarded as overambitious, and he excommunicated both Queen Elizabeth I of England and King Henry IV of France. He is recognized as a significant figure of the Counter-Reformation. He is the most recent pope to date to take on the pontifical name Sixtus. He would die from malaria. Urban VII was Roman. His 13-day papacy was the shortest in history. Giovanni Battista Castagna was born in Rome in 1521 to a noble family as the son of Cosimo Castagna of Genoa and Costanza Ricci Giacobazzi of Rome. Castagna, born in Rome in 1521, was a highly educated man who held various positions within the Roman Catholic Church. He served as the Archbishop of Rossano, governor of Fano, Perugia, and Umbria, and participated in the Council of Trent. Later, he was appointed as the Apostolic Nuncio to Spain and Venice, and served as the papal legate to Flanders and Cologne. He was elevated to cardinalate in 1583 by Pope Gregory XIII. Upon the death of Pope Sixtus V, Castagna was elected as Pope on the 15th of September 1590, taking the name Urban VII. He was known for his charity, public works projects, and strict opposition to nepotism. Urban VII is remembered for instituting the world's first known public smoking ban, threatening excommunication for those using tobacco in or near a church. He also subsidized public works projects throughout the Papal States. Urban VII was strictly against nepotism, and he forbade it within the Roman Curia. Dying of malaria, he was buried in the Vatican. His remains were later transferred to the Church of Santa Maria sopra Minerva on the 21st of September, 1606. Gregory XIV was Sommesi. Niccolo Sfondrati was born at Somma Lombardo, then part of the Duchy of Milan, in the highest stratum of Milanese society. His mother, of the House of Visconti, died in childbirth. His father, Francesco Sfondrati, a senator of the ancient commune of Milan, was created cardinal priest by Pope Paul III in 1544. On the day after he was elected pope, Gregory XIV burst into tears and said to the cardinals, "God forgive you. What have you done?" In his bull of the 21st of March, 1591, Cogit Nos, he forbade under pain of excommunication all betting concerning the election of a pope, the duration of a pontificate, or the creation of new cardinals. Pro-Spanish and distinctively anti-French, Gregory would excommunicate Henry IV of France on the 1st of March, 1591, levying an army for the invasion of France and placing his nephew at its head. He would decree that the natives of the Philippines would be free from slavery under pain of excommunication. Many biographers cite that Gregory would have a tendency to laugh at inopportune times, namely citing his coronation as pope. He died due to a large gallstone. Innocent IX was Bolognese. Prior to his short papacy, he had been a canon lawyer, diplomat, and chief administrator during the reign of his predecessor. Giovanni Antonio Facchinetti, born on the 20th of July, 1519, studied at the University of Bologna and was ordained as a priest in 1544. After serving under various cardinals, he was appointed Bishop of Nicastro in 1560 and was involved in the Council of Trent in 1562. In 1572, he was named the titular Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, and in 1583, Pope Gregory XIII made him a cardinal. Facchinetti was elected as Pope Innocent IX after 3 ballots during the papal conclave in 1591, choosing his papal name to honor Pope Innocent III. His short 2-month pontificate was marked by supporting the cause of Philip II of Spain and the Catholic League in the French Wars of Religion. Innocent IX died on the 30th of December, 1591, after falling ill, and he was buried in the Vatican grottos. Clement VIII was Florentine. Born in Fano to a prominent Florentine family, he initially came to prominence as a canon lawyer before being made a cardinal priest in 1585. In 1592, he was elected pope and took the name of Clement. During his papacy, he effected the reconciliation of Henry IV of France to the Catholic faith and was instrumental in setting up an alliance of Christian nations to oppose the Ottoman Empire in the so-called Long War. He also successfully adjudicated in a bitter dispute between the Dominicans and the Jesuits on the issue of efficacious grace and free will. In 1600, he presided over a jubilee which saw many pilgrimages to Rome. He presided over the trial and execution of the Hellenistic pagan occultist Giordano Bruno and implementing strict measures against followers of the Talmud who were committing acts of usury against the Christian residents of the Papal States. He may have been the first pope to drink coffee, blessing the coffee bean, and encouraged people to drink it over alcoholic beverages. Clement VIII died at the age of 69 in 1605, and his remains now rest in the Rome City Church of Santa Maria Maggiore,